please give a warm camp welcome to Robert Hammen. Hi, Robert.
Howdy.
Before we get started, please go ahead and share your presentation.
Welcome to macOS 11, what's new, how it affects you, and what to do to prepare. For those who don't know me, my name is Robert Hammen. I've been in the MacAdmin community for a long time. Recently relocated from the East Coast to the West Coast to work in the aerospace industry managing macOS and iOS devices. So, as you're probably very well aware, in June at Apple's virtual Worldwide Developer Conference, Apple introduced macOS 11 Big Sur, with shipping sometime in fall 2020. Continuing Apple's theme of naming after California places, this was the logical successor to Catalina. It's also led to some interesting different suggested names. I know I've seen predictive text changes to macOS Big Sur with an E, or yesterday was macOS Big Surprise. And of course, I've heard more than one MacAdmin refer to it as macOS BS. But I really think Apple missed the boat here. They really, when they took the opportunity to jump to version 11, they really should have broken from the California mode and called it Spinal Tap. For those who've never seen this mockumentary in the pandemic, it's a good viewing. It has to do with an amplifier where this one goes to 11. So let's talk about what's new in macOS Big Sur. And hand in hand with the introduction of Big Sur, Apple announced Apple Silicon, moving away from Intel processors to their own ARM-based custom processors. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. The biggest thing you'll visually notice with Big Sur is the changes to the user interface. It feels a lot like you're using a big iPad. Everything from the brighter colors to the bigger targets. The menu bar is bigger and translucent. The dock is also translucent, has rounded corners, new icons that are rounded, and again, give you that whole iOS vibe. I'm not saying that Apple's going to introduce touchscreen Macs, but if I was going to introduce a touchscreen Mac, I'd probably look at redesigning the OS to make it more touch friendly. And it seems that's my, pundit view of this is the direction Apple is headed. There's some nice changes. The notification center isn't that accidental thing you can tap out in the upper right corner. And it has widgets just like your iPhone does. We got Control Center on macOS, which will help clean up some of the visual clutter of all of the different icons on the upper right corner of the menu bar that makes your Mac look like an Android. And you can finally, without having to adjust NVRAM, you can finally get the Mac startup sound to show up in the sound preference pane. If you're an old Mac admin like myself, that's kind of a nice to see you back. There's some major changes in the Safari browser in Big Sur, performance improvements, UI changes. I really love the ability to preview when you're hovering over a tab. There's a lot of, obviously with Apple's focus on privacy and security, there's new intelligent tracking prevention, and you can get privacy reports. There's an icon that will tell you how many trackers are on a particular website. Another feature, which is killer, which was something that would make me occasionally fire up and use Chrome, the ability to translate a web page. Find something, this page, oh, it's in Russian. What are they saying? Okay. So having that built into the browser is great. Apple's also making a push again for developers to create Safari extensions. They're making it easier for developers to port their Chrome extensions, and they're making them available in the Mac App Store. The part that's missing for us as admins is there's no ability to mass deploy Safari extensions. So if you felt like you needed to push an ad blocker to your entire fleet, there's no easy way to do that with Safari. Let's talk a little bit about Project Catalyst. This is something that came out with macOS Catalina, and it was Apple's framework for allowing you to basically write and port iOS applications to macOS. There were 4 apps in Catalina that were Project Catalyst. They've now added 2 big ones, particularly the Messages app. This is a port from iOS. It has a bunch of new features, all the visual effects, things like mentions. It has search that actually works. The Maps app has similarly been ported from iOS and has features like look around and indoor mapping and guides for specific locations. So again, these are just some things that people will notice. Switching more to features or functionality that people as admins will be of interest, we now have auto advance for device enrollment for Mac. This is something that came out for Apple TV a long time ago. You just plug it into power and Ethernet and away it went. Well, same sort of scenario here. You can take a device that's been registered in Apple Business Manager. Power and Ethernet, power down, boot up, and it'll auto advance to the login window. You don't have those steps of having to pick the language and, you know, set your time zone and turn on location services and, you know, click a couple other dialogues. You can just zip right through. There is no step 3. A big one, a really big one, a big win for admins, software updates. Man, this is one of the things that has annoyed me about macOS for a while. In contrast with iOS. iOS updates, I pretty much felt like, yeah, okay, it's been out for a couple days, nobody's reporting major problems, I'll go ahead and update. And usually within 10, 15 minutes after downloading, I would have an updated phone ready to use. macOS, 45 minutes typically for an update. Why? Well, some of this has to do with the security on macOS, particularly the read-only system volume in macOS Catalina. There are entitlements that are required for processes to be able to modify that system volume. And the way that Apple chose to implement that was to require downloading the update, restarting into recovery, and then applying the update, which was great when it worked, but it took a really long time. And when it didn't work, your machine got stuck in a boot loop after recovery. And I know I've had to tell family members how to go into click on the Apple menu, select startup disk, reset it back to your hard drive, and try the update again. Try scaling that for several hundred, if not thousands of machines. So one of the big changes in Big Sur is we're getting the iOS update methodology to macOS. The volume now is not only read-only, it's also cryptographically signed. So based on this, the update can install while the system can begin to install while the system is booted. It'll still require a restart to finish the installation, but we're talking more like times of 10, 15, 20 minutes rather than 30 to 45 with current updates. There are also some new MDM commands associated with forcing updates or requesting updates. Some functionality that actually came out with macOS 10.15.5 is the ability to defer major updates for up to 90 days. I think some of the hue and cry about this came when Apple surprised us all with the Catalina advertisement in the Mojave software update preference pane. So Apple gives you the options of deferring the updates, major updates, for anywhere from 30 to 60 to 90 or days. If you need to defer them longer than 90 days, you're going to have to look at things like restricted software or Santa to block the installers. Along with deferring updates being gone, or being allowed only for that 90-day period, you can no longer set a custom software update catalog. So you can't run your own internal Apple software update server. That functionality has been gone from macOS Server for a while. macOS Server has kind of been gone for a while. But now this basically means that products like Reposado or the old NetSUS are now completely useless. And lastly, something again that came out in 10.15.5 and in security updates for Mojave and High Sierra, the ignore flag was deprecated. This was something that was used to hide that Catalina update from system preferences. And apparently Apple doesn't want us doing that anymore. So the ignore flag is gone. It's sort of coming back, but only for devices that are enrolled in Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager. Let's talk a little bit about bootstrap tokens. And back up to talk about this further, we'll talk about secure tokens. This has to do with APFS and encrypted file systems with File Vault. These systems use cryptographic keys to allow users to unlock the disk. Basically, your user account needs to have a secure token. If it doesn't have one, it can't turn File Vault on or off, and it can't unlock the disk at startup. And how accounts get secure tokens has been a challenge. Some of you may remember, I think it was 10.13.4, where all of a sudden we got this prompt for when new users would log into a Mac about, please enter a secure token administrator's username and password. And everybody's like, what is this? So managing File Vault and secure token has definitely been a challenge for MacAdmins. Bootstrap tokens in Catalina was an attempt to solve this problem. And this was functionality that changed as Catalina changed. Basically, it allows MDMs to grant a secure token to, in the case of 10.15, to mobile accounts for devices that are bound to Active Directory. In Big Sur, Bootstrap tokens have been extended where they can now provide secure tokens to local accounts. And you can also query list and delete local users, so help manage local users on a system. Kind of moving away from the concept of mobile accounts just a little bit. Another change that Apple telegraphed in Catalina, when you download a configuration profile, be it from an email, web server, used to be able to double click that profile or use the profiles command to install it, and it would be installed. So there were nefarious actors could do things like download a package that had a profile installed and a script that would install it and redirect all of your, all your network traffic to some proxy server and spam you with ads. So in order to get away from this, Apple has restricted these profiles where they must be approved by the user. They will show up in the System Preferences Profiles preference pane for 8 minutes. Why that arbitrary time? I don't know. Some MDM enrollment workflows depend on curling down a config profile and installing it. These profiles obviously will break with Big Sur. Let's talk a little bit about supervision. So what is supervision? It allows control over bootstrap tokens, activation lock bypass, certain restrictions require supervision, and scheduling software updates, and the ignore flag. So in order to use supervision with Catalina, you had to have, that device had to be enrolled using either Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager. Now with Big Sur, devices that are user approved for MDM will also be supervised upon upgrade. Now, you don't get all the benefits of being in Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager. That MDM profile is still removable, and the whole setup process is still manual. It's not the automated approach that we've had with Apple's device enrollment. Let's talk more about kernel extensions. Apple's been telegraphing for years that KEX are dead, are dying. They started with requirements to have them signed, and then you had to be user approved, and then Apple started really, when they introduced Catalina last year, sort of saying the end is near. Developers, you need to port your stuff to our new frameworks for network extensions, replacing the old kernel extensions. Backing up a little bit, kernel extensions run at the kernel level and can have a really significant impact on OS stability. So Apple wants them out of the kernel space into the user space, which is where the new network extensions run. What's making matters even more fun, Apple Silicon Macs will require booting into recovery in order to enable kernel extensions. If you end up with a lot of Apple Silicon devices, this doesn't scale well at all. Phil Stokes from SentinelOne wrote a blog that actually got posted yesterday. I just updated the slide this morning with this about why we need to move away from KEX. Again, they've been dying for years. And I strongly recommend that you do not try to deploy security tools that have KEX or kernel extensions in macOS Big Sur. I don't think you or your users are going to have a good time. Some other new things for those who have managed iOS. We now have managed Mac apps. This works a lot like iOS do, where you can use MDM to remove apps from the App Store or when the device is unenrolled. You also can restrict or apply configurations, managed app configurations, aka app config. And you can also manage apps on devices that are currently unmanaged, just like you can in iOS. Content caching has been updated on macOS. It supports caching internet recovery. So if you're doing a lot of reprovisioning of devices, this will help with bandwidth. And there's also some new MDM commands to get information and reporting on how much cache data, how much data is being cached and utilized. Some changes that are coming down the pike. This is not something that is going to affect current models of hardware, but future products as they are announced. Apple is moving to a randomized serial number format. In the past, your Mac serial number is something that could be decoded. People had actually worked out the logic behind it. And I know, for example, Joe Chilcote had a warranty script, Python script that I used many years ago that would query serial numbers of devices and basically decode when it was produced, at what factory, all this sort of stuff. So in a move towards privacy, Apple's moving towards this 10-character completely randomized serial number. So just be aware of this, that this change is coming with new products. If you're somebody that uses Apple's Enterprise Connect app and you have not moved to the single sign-on extension that came out of macOS Catalina, macOS Big Sur will be the last version that will support it. In general, given that everything we've been through in 2020 with the majority of people working from home or not in the office, this has really kind of brought to light the difficulty that it is supporting binding to Active Directory and mobile accounts and things like, when you have to change your password remotely, and does your keychain password update, and does your file vault password update. And, this is part of a general trend. I think that people, if your organization is not looking at cloud-based identity providers, whether it's Azure, Okta, Ping, whatever, your organization probably should be looking at as we tend to move away from the traditional Active Directory binding. All right, let's talk about Apple Silicon. And I couldn't resist combining two memes here from Battlestar Galactica. This has all happened before and it will happen again. Apple Silicon represents the third time that Apple has changed processor architecture in the Mac's 36-year history. And Jesus, when I typed 36 years, I kind of shuddered to think the Mac's been around that long. I guess I'm just old. In 1994, we had the translation from 68K to PowerPC processors. We then, from 2005 to 2007, Apple moved away from the Motorola PowerPC to Intel and used the Rosetta technology to allow current PowerPC code to run on Intel, and that was really tricky. And now at the developer conference, Apple announced their intent over the next 2 years to transition away from Intel processors to Apple Silicon, which is based on ARM. And they've brought back the Rosetta name and called it Rosetta 2, Electric Boogaloo, kidding, to help with translating Intel code to run on ARM processors. Let's take a little bit of a look. A modern Intel-based Mac has a number of components. Typically, it has a multi-core Intel CPU. If you pay enough money, you get a discrete GPU, like on a 16-inch MacBook Pro or a 27-inch iMac. Each one of these CPU and GPU has their own separate memory. You've also got the T2 security chip. You got separate RAM, etc. One of the advantages of Apple Silicon is that's all integrated into one chip. You've got the multi-core CPU. You've got both high and low and fast performance and I forget how they phrase it, but it's power, optimized performance. You've got a GPU. You've got the secure enclave. You've got neural processors, machine learning accelerators, and other technology, even memory in a single chip. So you're reducing the hardware complexity of the device. And again, this is Apple's graphic on all of the things that are represented by Apple Silicon in a single chip. In general, Apple's been able to achieve higher performance than standard Intel processors, at least on the low to middle end. Intel still has very high-end things. I think the Mac Pro is probably the last device to move completely to Apple Silicon, but I'm sure they're working on it. One of the advantages of, again, having this all in a single, smaller die chip is much better thermal characteristics. And alongside that, much better power consumption. So what can we expect when Apple introduces Apple Silicon Macs? Well, higher performance than current Intel-based systems. I'm going to stake my claim on that. Significant battery life and runtime improvements. And this is one of those places where if you've been paying attention to the things Apple's been doing over the years, as they've been introducing things like dark mode and getting rid of kernel extensions and so on, they've been preparing for this transition since probably the days of about macOS 10.12. Imagine, if you will, an ARM Mac laptop that has an OLED display and is super thin and light. You could have upwards of 16, 24 hours, multiple days of battery life on a laptop. Depends how long your workday is, I guess. And again, just a graphic from Apple talking about power consumption performance. Again, you can see notebooks are going to be terrific for power consumption. Desktops are going to be terrific for performance. Okay, so how do you run your current Intel-based Mac apps on an Apple Silicon Mac? Well, again, that's where Rosetta will come in, will translate in the apps. And the performance looks to be pretty good. This looks like they've been working on this for a while. This was something they kept very, very secret. We weren't even sure there was going to be an emulation layer until the WWDC sessions were announced. Developers are encouraged to port their apps to Apple Silicon, creating universal applications, aka fat binaries. Again, all of this has happened before and will happen again. Apple introduced the $500 developer transition kit at the developer conference. What this is a Mac Mini style case that has a logic board with an Apple A12Z processor in it. Apple's current processor in the iPhone 11, and I think the new SE is the A13, and I suspect the A14 is coming with this fall's new hardware. Again, this is not something that developers buy and own. This is just like the Intel transition kit. This is a loaner. It is not something that I think most admins are going to want to play with. I know some have. This is really geared to developers to use to get their apps ported and working. I think the biggest question I have about the Apple Silicon Macs is what their pricing will be like. You know, we can discuss TCO and Apple's reports on total cost of ownership, but you know, it's undeniable that Macs are much more expensive to procure than comparable HP and Dell laptops. I face this argument all the time at my work. When you look at the iOS world, tablets are pretty much in the same price range. There's not as much of a disparity between the cost of other devices and iOS devices as there is between macOS and that. So the question I have is, will Apple Silicon-based Macs still sell at a price premium at Apple's traditionally high margins, or will the lower cost, they don't have to pay Intel for this stuff, all that stuff down in a single chip, the logic board is probably going to be smaller, will that translate to a lower cost Mac? I'm really curious to see what happens here. I think this presents Apple with some great opportunities to expand corporate Mac sales. I've worked in a number of organizations, both as a consultant and as an employee. You know, it seems like the execs, all the devs, a lot of the IT engineers, people, and InfoSec love Macs, all people coming out of college. Again, that thinner and lighter device with multi-day battery life, with a reputation for usability and security. And one of the other big things we haven't talked about is the ability on Apple Silicon Macs to be able to run iOS apps natively. This is, again, huge in the corporate world because most organizations have a large iOS presence. Many of them have their own apps. So being able to run that same, you know, expense tracking or trip reporting app or inspection app or ERP app that they already have on a Mac without any additional work, that's definitely something that's positive. So that's enough on the new features. Now we're going to talk about how it affects you. Sorry, Apple, I couldn't resist this meme. One of the big problems with macOS Catalina has been, there's been a lot of versions of it. I like to call it version confusion. You've had the initial release of macOS Catalina. You've actually had 6 updates and 5 supplemental updates. The most recent one yesterday. I had to change this slide. Version numbers of macOS have gone major, which has been 10 since 2001. Minor, we're up to 15, and then subversion, which in recent versions have been anywhere from .0 actually, but the updates .1 to .6. And then Apple's added the concept of, we have this supplemental update that fixes these additional things. So this leads to the question of what version of macOS are you running? 10.15.6. Okay, which version of 10.15.6? I don't know. What's the build number? So there's kind of this arcane knowledge you have to have of macOS. Compare this to the iOS world, where, you know, I'm on iOS 13.6.1, which also dropped yesterday. That's easy to remember, not 10.15.6 build 20, you know, G2021 or whatever we're at right now. So moving to macOS versioning, the major version to 11 may solve this. We can do things like have version 11.2.1 and be comparable to iOS. It'd be a lot easier for both admins and users to track what version of the operating system am I actually running. However, with progress, there also becomes challenges. How many people have scripts that do things that, depending on the version of macOS that is installed? Version detection and scripts. So many scripts have assumed for years that version 10 is not going to change and ignored it and just looked at the other octets. Well, you can't assume any of your scripts are going to work correctly on Big Sur. It's not only just scripts, it's things like extension attributes in Jamf. You also have to worry about smart groups in Jamf and scoping and things like that and whatever your MDM. There's a blog post on semantic versioning. I talked to one well-known MacAdmin, and he indicated that about 10% of his large library of scripts needed some kind of modification for compatibility with Big Sur. So this is something you're going to want to definitely get your hands wrapped on well before the product ships. Some other considerations. Again, given that Big Sur will provide support for ARM-based Macs, and those ARM-based devices, you're going to see more software like Office come out in universal format. Office is already pretty big. The installer is about 1.5 gigs to download. Imagine with ARM code added to it. If you've got a large fleet of Macs with 128 gig or even 256 gig SSDs, you might start feeling the pinch of space. Speaking of Office, if your organization is still on Office 2016 and is not updated to 2019 yet, we are coming up on the end of life for Office 2016. The last update is coming out next month. The official no longer support date is in early October. And basically, if you read between the lines, Office 2016 is not guaranteed to run on macOS Big Sur or on Apple Silicon-based systems. It certainly won't run natively. It may not run an emulation. If you haven't migrated yet to 2019, you need to be having some conversations with the rest of your IT management. I couldn't resist bringing back this slide. It's Marcus Ransom from Australia. Privacy preferences policy control. This has definitely been something in recent versions of macOS that has caused some pain for admins to manage and understand what they need to allow to stop getting prompts. Apple has made only one significant change that we found so far with relating to privacy preferences policy control in macOS Big Sur, and that is screen recording. It used to be that, while you could not pre-approve applications like Teams, for example, for screen recording, users could go in and do it whether they had admin rights or not. In Big Sur, they've now changed that requirement that user has to be an admin, and there are some environments where users are never admins. So this presents a problem. I strongly suggest filing feedback on this issue, and we'll talk more about feedback in a little bit. Okay, Apple Silicon support. If you're not going to be ready to adopt Big Sur at release, you won't be ready for, obviously you're not going to be ready to adopt Apple Silicon Macs when they ship, because they're going to require macOS 11. So the question you have to ask yourself and do a little bit of planning is, how long will it be before I'm going to be able to support Big Sur? 3 months? 6 months? How much hardware am I going to need in that time period? And strongly suggest, before October-ish, I would strongly suggest that you buy stock and keep it on hand so that you have a supply of machines that you can provision and run Catalina on until you are ready for Big Sur. And again, I don't have any Apple stock. This doesn't benefit me in any way. I'm just trying to give you advice to make sure that you don't get hung out to dry. And it's not that Intel Macs are going away either. They're going to transition out over the next couple of years. But I think if the Apple Silicon Macs are as compelling as I think they're going to be, people are going to want them. So you're going to get that pressure from your organization to support them, whether you anticipate it or not. Getting back to how it affects you, I know people have really enjoyed the ability with Intel Macs to do things like use Boot Camp and run Windows on them for gaming or whatever. Also to run virtualization tools and run, Windows, Linux, whatever on your device. Now that Apple has moved to the Apple Silicon, there is no more Boot Camp. There is no, x86 or x64 emulation. You'll be able to emulate ARM. There's still a hypervisor framework in the OS. You'll be able to emulate ARM versions of Linux, CentOS, that sort of stuff. As to x86 or x64, we're still to be determined. And one thing that this kind of puts the death knell into the Hackintosh market, where people would basically create their own Macs, based on off-the-shelf logic boards and things like that. Again, that's very much a hobbyist thing, and not corporations were not using that. But as Apple transitions away from Intel and Intel Macs move away from being supported down the road, that the Hackintosh world will probably end. Printers. IT people love printers. Sarcasm. In Catalina, Apple warned you, Mac printer drivers are deprecated and will stop working in a future version of Cups. Doesn't seem to be Big Sur the one that's going to end it. But you should still probably test in your environment. Okay, real truth here. With basically the demise of KEX, this is the perfect time, if you haven't done so already, to reevaluate your security posture and what tools you're using on the platform. You're probably going to have to work with your information security staff. And I'll remind people that this is not a competition in how many mandatory agents you have to install on client endpoints. My time in government space told me differently. She or he who dies of the most agents doesn't win, and they had a terrible user experience while they were going through it. So you should really start talking about why you feel the need to install multiple agents and what checklist what problems you think you're solving. Each one of these agents is actually a rootkit on your system and a vulnerability in and of itself. So if you can reduce that attack surface by reducing the number of tools on a system, that's a win. If you haven't already begun a dialogue with the vendors you're using, it's time to do so now. And the questions to ask them are, where are you at with migrating from kernel extensions to system extensions? And when will you have your product available? Will you be available for day 0? And will all the functionality be present? Because there are some vendors who are saying, yeah, we'll be ready, but it won't have X, Y, or Z. Well, then why do I have this software? If it's looking like we're getting close to the time that Big Sur is going to ship, and your security vendor is not ready and can't tell you when they're going to be ready, they failed. Apple's been telling people for years, the writing's been on the wall, and telling people for the last 14 months, the end is nigh. It's time to find a new vendor if this is in fact the case. And this leads to a bigger discussion. InfoSec always wants to insist upon the single pane of glass, which is more affectionately known as the single glass of Pane. How many orgs insist that you have to use the same cross-platform security tool for Mac, Windows, and Linux? And usually the Mac gets about 10% of the development time and budget, and it's often terrible. The common pushback to this is to say, well, if all we ever used were single pane of glass tools, we'd be managing our Macs with Microsoft Endpoint Manager, the old SCCM Intune, instead of Jamf or Workspace ONE or Monkey, Simple MDM, etc. You really need to make the argument to use the best tools available for the platform. Implement the security controls that you need, but you don't have to use the same single pane of glass. That is a fallacy. So, how do you prepare for macOS Big Sur using this one weird trick? Testing. As the expression goes, test early and test often. If you haven't already begun testing Big Sur in your environment, you are behind the 8 ball. If you skipped macOS Catalina in your environment, you're still on Mojave and you're intending to go to Big Sur, you're even further behind the 8 ball. So you're going to want to jump on testing right away. You want to keep it on the MacAdmins Slack, keep an eye on the Apple Dev RSS channel and read the release notes and see what's coming. And I'll also point out that testing is something that needs to be done all throughout the year. It's not just a June until October timeframe until Apple releases the OS, because Apple often does release or make significant changes in the OS in point versions, and they can catch you unawares. So again, why should you test it now besides the advantage of getting to be able to support your organization? Well, you can provide feedback to Apple and shape the direction of the OS. And again, the earlier the better. If you're filing feedback on critical issues, like the whole screen recording thing, that feedback is better received and there's a greater chance that Apple is going to do something about it if you file that feedback in June or July rather than in September or October. It may also help you find issues that are exclusive to your environment and will allow you to support as close to when the product is released, and it also future-proofs you for that Apple Silicon hardware that's coming down the pipe. So again, why should I worry about supporting it right away? Well, we've kind of transitioned to an agile-based security model where we've gone from the whole process of very methodical, slow user testing, and you have a change management, change control board, backup plans, that sort of stuff, to, well, I installed this Office update on my system and it didn't blow up, so everybody's getting it. And again, this is something that you look at the industry. Apple's certainly taken the agile approach with macOS. Microsoft has done it with monthly releases of Office. Adobe has done this with their monthly releases, or sometimes more often when there's security vulnerabilities of their software. So this is again not new. It's been an unstated maxim in the Mac world that Apple will provide patches for the current OS and the previous two. So when Big Sur ships, Apple will support updates and patches for Catalina and for Mojave. The reality is that not all fixes are backported to the OS, and not just security fixes. I've had actual functional problems with devices that Apple said, well, that's fixed in Catalina, update. And it goes back to the old saying, if you want to have the most secure Mac, you have to be running the latest OS with the latest apps on it. It does you no good to be on the latest OS and you're still running Microsoft Office 16.29, 11 versions old. So let's talk about the system requirements. What Macs are supported by macOS 11? And Apple's done a pretty good job of going back 5, 6, 7 years. The Trash Can Mac Pro, the 2014 Mac Mini and iMac, the 2013 and up MacBook Air, the late 2013 and up MacBook Pros, the 2015 MacBook, and the 2017 iMac Pro. The only reason that sounds kind of sad, that's the first and only model of the iMac Pro that's come out. The official requirement is about 4 gigs of RAM. The reality is 8's probably a more realistic minimum. 16 gig is obviously preferred in new hardware. And between 25 and 50 gigs of free storage space, depending if you're doing an in-place upgrade or a new install. So the methods, how do you get Big Sur? In the past, the primary way people have done it is through the developer program. You pay $100 a year, and it gets you access to macOS and iOS and watchOS and tvOS. And it also gives you the ability to create application and installer certs that help you sign installation packages, notarize them, sign config profiles, that sort of stuff. That'll generally be announced the same day that the new OSs are released. There's also the public beta. This is often delayed, and this actually, when I created this presentation, the public beta was still not out. It came out, I think, sometime last week. How you should be getting the OS, however, is using AppleSeed for IT. How do I get access to AppleSeed for IT? Well, if you have an account in Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager, you have access to AppleSeed for IT. You don't have to bug your SE anymore. And as an aside, please file all feedback on macOS Big Sur using your AppleSeed for IT Apple ID, not any Apple IDs associated with your Apple Developer Program. So what's available in AppleSeed? Well, test plans, and Apple's also had a number of virtual base camps where they've had calls where they've taken questions and they've presented material, and they've given people test plans that are also posted in AppleSeed. If you have an Apple SE, I strongly suggest talking to them and finding out what the schedule for those are. I know there were some scheduled for July and August. I don't know if there are any additional ones upcoming or if they've all passed. There are also discussion forums, and what can also be useful is the What's New for Enterprise and Education PDF. You don't have to have any of these programs to actually be able to get on the beta program. You can use the seedutil command documented here and on Rich Troughton's blog to enroll your Mac in the Developer Seed program. So how do you go about testing? Well, I used to recommend virtual machines, and then last year Catalina, kind of like in VMware, didn't play nice together until a new version of VMware came out in September. So I've kind of moved my mindset to that first few betas that come out, you probably want to test on physical hardware. Not your daily driver, I will point out, but you probably want to provision a device, a test device that doesn't have any data on it that you care about, and make sure that device is enrolled in your management system, and then upgrade it and see what the experience is like. And oh, by the way, uninstall your security tools. When the community has worked out that virtual machines are available, if you want to do some repetitive testing of things like enrollment, that's where virtual machines can come in handy in the ability to roll back to snapshots. But that's going to require compatible versions of the software, like for example, the VMware Fusion Technology Preview or the latest Parallels desktop. As we get closer to release, and after you've validated important software, things like Office, your VPN, and so on, it might be time to consider updating your daily driver and living the OS. That way you're ready to support it when it's released. Make sure you've got backups, but I don't generally update my daily driver up until that last month or so before updates. I wait later in the beta channel because those first betas are definitely a little iffy as far as stability. And one other tip is that you probably want to sign out of iCloud on any device, on any test device, just because there have been some changes in iCloud. Not as much in Big Sur as there was in Catalina, but there have been issues where updates to iCloud from Big Sur devices have caused problems with non-Big Sur devices. And repeat after me, before updating, remove your security agents. And also, this is where the comment about checking your scoping and things like Jamf. I uninstalled my security agents. I updated my test device to Big Sur, and then found that my security agents accidentally got reinstalled because my Jamf management system did what I had engineered it to do, which is, hey, this device doesn't have security tool. Let's put it on here. So I had to adjust the scoping on it to make sure, let's not push this to the Big Sur machines just yet. Okay, when subsequent betas come out, again, this whole process of betas can be a little iffy. Sometimes those beta updates don't work and you have to do, if not a reinstall, you might have to do a nuke and pave. When you find bugs, when you've got a machine that's gone from beta 1 to beta 2 to beta 3 and you run into an issue, you should probably try it on a VM or on another system to make sure it's really a bug or not just some kind of artifact of your testing and upgrading. I found this tweet to be both humorous and accurate. Well played, sir. So there is a consistent cycle. Again, we're on this agile release methodology. About every 2 weeks, there's a new beta. And again, you want to avoid your temptation of updating your primary Mac right away. You will hate yourself if you do. Testing enrollment can be fun because your MDM vendor may not be ready to release day 0 support. You should talk to them about when they're going to have available, if are they going to support day 0, and are they going to have pre-release versions that you could stand up at your own development server, if you don't already have one, that has macOS 11 support in it. Many good products out there. Find one that meets your needs and your budget. My yearly reminder that if you don't have a runbook that documents everything that is done to a new out-of-box Mac to make it your Mac, you need to do this. And then this gives you something that you can then check to make sure it's actually working in your testing provisioning. You definitely want to test both devices that are in device enrollment on a T2 machine, not on a T2 machine, devices not in device enrollment. Again, the T2 Macs, which are the 2017 and later iMac Pro, mid 2018 and later MacBook Pros, and the newest Mac Pro and even the newest iMacs all have a T2 chip. Again, it's for security. It's a somewhat different environment than a regular Mac because there's 2 OSs, macOS and BridgeOS. There's some tricky parts involved with updating, and people have done things like power machines off when BridgeOSs are running because the screen is black and they think it's hung. But more importantly, there are things T2 machines default to requiring the OS to be cryptographically signed and also disable external boot. And this makes the recovery environments and reprovisioning very different between T2 and non-T2 machines. When you're testing on T2-based machines, and this is another option for you if you don't have a separate hardware, you can create another partition and install Big Sur on it, or install Catalina as a backup and then upgrade your primary to Big Sur. Because on a T2 machine, if you, with external boot disabled by default, you may not be able to, let's say your beta OS goes south, you may have problems getting a functional system unless you have the separate partition and be able to option boot into a previous but known good OS. Things you're going to want to test, your applications. You're obviously going to want to get the latest versions of things. Do they launch? Do they function correctly? There are some compendiums out there on the internet of people who have tested app compatibility. This is where things like the Big Sur channel and MacAdmins Slack is really good for. For automated testing, the folks at SAP have a blog post on how they're using a tool called Sakuli to do automated GUI testing of apps, and sort of the infinite number of monkeys trying to make sure that if an app breaks. You're going to want to expand the testing outside of IT to early adopters. You need to find people who are going to be good beta testers for you. Finding this is an art, not a science. You've got to know people that are good communicators and are not going to be doom and gloom in the end of the world. People who are going to be willing, who are going to understand that there may be some pain associated with being involved in this UAT environment, user testing, but are willing to do that to help move the project forward. So let's talk about reporting bugs to Apple. This used to be known as filing a radar. Now it's Feedback Assistant. This is something that's been new as of Catalina. Learn to use it. It's either an application on your Mac or you can go to feedbackassistant.apple.com. Something new in Big Sur is you can actually look at team feedback. So if you're part of a larger organization, you can see what others in your organization have submitted. There's also a community source feedback Google Doc on MacAdmins Slack. I think there's 21 feedback items listed up there. I've looked at them. Many of them are very good. You can dupe that feedback and kind of amplify that. If you want to get into the AppleSeed private channel, join the AppleSeed channel, and instructions there. I'll tell you how to get into the private channel. And if you haven't seen Feedback Assistant, this is what it looks like. Some general topics on how to write a good bug report. Provide an accurate title subject. This stuff doesn't work. Not helpful. Try to describe what you're trying to accomplish, rather than just say, I'm doing X and it doesn't work. It may be more beneficial to say, I'm trying to do X, and I used to do it this way, and this way doesn't work anymore. Write a very detailed description of what you're seeing, what is not working. Is this something that is new, or did this used to work? Can you reproduce this on another machine, on a virtual machine, another physical machine? What are the actual steps to reproduce it? Things like screenshots, videos, scripts, code, test cases, complete error messages are helpful. Logs. Again, what was the expected results? What were the actual results? Were you able to figure out a workaround? And most importantly, how critical is this to you? I can't print any Ricoh printers. Well, that's kind of important. We've got 4,000 Ricoh printers. That's an example, not a real world one. Try to explain to Apple how impactful this is to your organization. Again, part of this will use the sysdiagnose functionality. If you're not familiar with sysdiagnose, you can do man sysdiagnose. There's some keyboard gymnastics that will be involved in creating sysdiagnoses. The Apple Care Enterprise people will ask you for sysdiagnoses all the time. When you use Feedback Assistant, sysdiagnose is created automatically. If you work in a high security environment, that sysdiagnose may contain confidential information about your network and devices, and you may be precluded from using or submitting sysdiagnose. So be aware of that. Again, if this is a critical bug or issue, file feedback. Do it with your Apple Business Manager Apple ID. Don't do it with a developer ID. The Apple's enterprise team monitors all the feedback coming in from Apple Business Manager and Apple School Manager Apple IDs. They don't monitor the developer feedback. That is a much larger pool and gets much less attention. It's recommended that you file feedback for each beta release. Things like the SSO extension is broken in beta 1, yep, beta 2 still broken, okay, beta 3 still broken. Also recommended, if this is important to you, open an Apple Care Enterprise case. Once you've submitted feedback and open that case, email your SE. SEs have a path to escalate serious issues that impact their customers in significant ways. A couple of resource links for you on sysdiagnose and profiles and logging. Again, this presentation will be available for download. And with that, we have reached the end of the formal presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. Well, we got some Q&A here. So I'm just going to go ahead and start off at the top. With profiles being user approved, how do we zero touch deployments?
So yeah, so you need an MDM, and you need to be able to deploy. If your device is an Apple Business Manager and Apple School Manager, and you have an MDM, those profiles can be pushed automatically. If your device is a user enrolled MDM, i.e. it's not an Apple's device enrollment, but that MDM profile has been approved, again, they can be pushed. Where you run into problems if you have no MDM and you're trying to push profiles, you're going to have a bad time.
Okay. Do we know if the SSO extensions will be required instead of Nomad?
Right now, I think in the world of alternatives to binding to Active Directory, I don't think there's any requirement. There's a number of tools out there. Apple has their SSO extension. I know Microsoft is working on some things for Azure, and there's things like Nomad/Jamf Connect. You have a lot of different options for not binding and/or using cloud identity service providers. So that's something that you should probably, your organization may be looking at this. Most organizations are not 100% Mac centric. You've got a Windows component which may or may not be larger than your Mac environment, and they may have their own ideas. So this is where you need to talk to your colleagues on the other side of the aisle and try to figure out, hey, what do you guys starting to think about some kind of, enterprise auth, outside of on-premise Active Directory, and just sort of having those conversations and then trying to figure out what, what tool you really want to, what path is the organization going and how can I make my Mac adapt to that path?
Okay, great. Do you know if Rosetta 2 will be as transparent as Rosetta was, or will it be something clunkier like Classic?
From what I've seen, and I've a very limited basis, some demos, it looks pretty transparent. There's a lot of, again, the ARM processors are fascinating because you have two high performance core, they're multi-core processors, and you have high performance cores, and you have, basically ones that are tuned for, for heat and power, or thermal and power issues. Rosetta seems to emulate about 4 cores on an Intel machine. So, obviously the higher, if you're trying to do some things with like Final Cut and you're, using Rosetta 2, you're probably not going to get as great a performance as you would natively on an Intel machine. So just like the days when, when we had Rosetta, you didn't necessarily want to run Photoshop in Rosetta. You wanted to wait for that native app to ship. I mean, the good news is the developers seem to be much more on the ball. A lot of I remember the days of Rosetta, and developers like, I think it was Quicken and Quark and stuff like that, were really lagging behind the times. We had to live with Rosetta for a while. And when Apple released macOS 10.7 and yanked Rosetta out of the OS, that really caused problems for a lot of these software vendors. So again, it seems to be less finicky than Classic. The big thing to keep in mind with Classic too is that Classic was its own separate OS running inside. It was the classic macOS running inside. It was a nested OS. It was like running VMware with Windows in it. Whereas Rosetta is more of a application translocation.
Okay, and yeah, that kind of leads us into our next question about any additional info on running Boot Camp or VMware to run Windows on these ARM processors. Do you think we'll see anything there?
I do think so. I don't think there'll be boot camp, but I think virtualization. I don't think, first of all, if I remember correctly, I don't believe ARM Macs are allowed to run anything other than macOS. So I think boot camp is definitely out. I think running, since there still is a hypervisor framework in the OS, I think they're, and I know that VMware is looking at providing x64. I don't know what the performance is going to be like. And again, it may be something where, emulating Intel on ARM might not be very good performance for the first few generations of Apple Silicon, but it's something to keep in mind. Intel hasn't really, over the last probably 6, 7, 8 years, we haven't seen really significant performance increases in the Intel processors, the i7, i9, and things like that. If you compare and contrast what Apple's been able to do with the A series chips and all the iOS devices and the things that are coming in the A14, I have a lot of faith that Apple is going to, those yearly, new CPU introductions are going to introduce significant performance improvements. So what may be painful today in emulation may not be so painful in a year or two. And maybe that's, again, Intel Macs are not going away anytime soon. They're still going to keep making and selling them for at least 2 years and probably supporting them far longer. I mean, again, you look back at the fact that we're in 2020, we're able to run the latest OS on devices that were out in 2013. That's pretty good. Most Windows.
I'm sorry, Robert. I accidentally muted you. That's my fault. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. I can't do it from my side. I meant to unmute myself and I hit mute all. Sorry about that.
No worries. I think what I was saying was, I think it's pretty good that you're able to run the latest modern OS on a hardware that's at least 7 years old. Most Windows hardware that's in active use from 7 years ago is probably in a landfill, unless it's like powered off under somebody's desk. So I anticipate that Intel Macs are still going to be around for a while. So again, I don't, I think some people have a concern too that I don't know if I should buy any Intel Macs because Apple's making this transition, and that's something every organization has to make that decision for themselves. And a lot of it depends on how soon you're going to be ready to adopt Apple Silicon and what the value proposition is. But I think it's going to be pretty strong. Personally, I'm not planning on buying any more Intel Macs unless they're used. Certainly not new ones. For myself, not talking about my employer. For my employer, we have business needs. Work's got to get done. Intel Macs are getting bought. I'll worry about it later. We like to have a 5-year life cycle on our hardware at least, says the man that's looking at as a stack of 2013 and 2014 and 2015 devices on his desk. He's finally gotten out of service. But when the time is right to make that jump to ARM or to Apple Silicon, we will.
Great. Do we have or can we create a wall of shame for security companies who still have kernel extensions?
Well, it's. But I'm gonna bring up a point is that one of the first companies who I will not name, one of the first companies to release a system extension has done such a horrible job of it. They've caused such major instability across their people using their product, and everybody who's had to use it knows which product I'm talking about. I'd say this is probably a good topic for the Big Sur channel on MacAdmins Slack, maybe even the security channel. It would be a really good idea if someone would compare or would do a compendium of talks with vendors if they're able to. I know I've had conversations with the Bitdefender folks and also with FireEye and Symantec and things like that about where they're at. And I know that the Sentinel-1 folks have their blog posts have announced they're ready, and I know that the McAfee folks are aiming to be ready by the time that things ship. So where we tend to find this is more some of the forensic software and some of the more edge case tools seem to be the ones that are lagging behind. Basically those tools that didn't support Catalina when it shipped, those people already have strike one against them. And again, Apple's been holding developer kitchens trying to push these developers to get their stuff ported and giving them the, we think it'll take you about a year to port this. You've got about 16 months. Well, we're about 14 months into it. So, Apple's pushing as hard as they can on the finish line is approaching. And again, hopefully we'll see these vendors. And again, there are some vendors, the people out there like Dan Griggs and Command Reporter and Jamf with Jamf Protect who have new security tools that have adopted the endpoint security frameworks. They didn't have to port because they're a new product. So they've been early on the game. They are most definitely not on that wall of shame.
Yeah, good. How would you recommend building a case to your security group that many of these agents are not necessary for security, and tools like Gatekeeper or XProtect and SIP might be sufficient?
So this is always a challenge. I remember having this conversation when I worked in the government space with one of the security people and say, well, can you show me a report where our endpoint security tool of choice, where it actually found and removed something, some malware or AV on a Mac? And it couldn't do it. And then I accidentally, I did get that product to one time when I was testing another AV product that would remove malware. I got the original product to trigger and flag a whole bunch of things when I used a second product to remove actual malware that was on systems. Our first tool didn't detect it until I was running a trial version of a second tool that actually detected and tried to quarantine it. And then the first tool said, hey, oops, something's going on here. So I think what's important to that is having the ability to show what, and this is a good chance to talk to your Apple SEs and point your people to the Apple security PDF file that's on Apple's website, and talk to your SEs and talk about the presentations that Apple has on the security of macOS and iOS, and talk about the things like Gatekeeper and XProtect and MRT. And if you're using a tool like Jamf, there's some built-in functionality and some extension attributes you can write that actually do reporting. I mean, it's one thing to say I have XProtect on my machines, but if it's not configured to get the updates, it's not helping you. So being able to, just like in a console, and say, well, here are X number of Macs, and 80% of them have the latest definitions update. Being able to build those things, whether you're using like Jamf Pro to do it, whether Jamf Protect has that functionality built in, I believe, as a dashboard reporting, or maybe using some kind of business intelligence tool, things like Snowflake or so on, to be able to, or Power BI, to be able to pull that data out of your management system and present it. You're going to need to be able to show, these tools are here, they're effective, and that they're working as designed. And again, I think the other point to hammer in is the fact that, again, every one of those security agents you put on a system takes up CPU time, takes up RAM, has a potential for instability, and it's also it opens up the attack surface. It's a vector into that system, because those security tools generally run privileged, and that's basically a rootkit on your system. So more rootkits does not equal more security.
Right. Okay. Good point. Yeah, reporting is important for leadership. That's what they'd like to see.
That's why they want that. That's why they want that single pane of glass. But if you can show them that, hey, here's our dashboard that shows where we're at, and there's other things too. I mean, Nessus is not my favorite, security vulnerability tool. It has a lot of things, but it is helpful to be able to point to those pie charts and say, well, look, here's Linux, here's Windows, here's Mac. And hey, notice there's like no highs and criticals here because we got all our stuff patched. Yeah, pat myself on the back.
Will we be able to share your slides after the presentation, Robert?
Absolutely. I have a series. Yeah, I will. Yeah, I will be sharing them, and I have a number of links which I did not display in here, which I'll be putting at the end of the presentation. One of the advantages the extra couple weeks have bought me is ability to flesh those out substantially. So I will most definitely be making this available, if not later today, then by first thing tomorrow.
Okay, very great. We've got another question here from an R&D department in a large organization looking after about 200 Macs. They use Monkey to rebuild and customize, including profiles and security certificates. They don't use MDM because of the costs and relatively small numbers. So any tips on how we can use Profile Manager as a basic MDM, or some other path to look at for that organization?
Friends don't let friends use Profile Manager. Somebody who's been burned by people trying to force me to use Profile Manager as a consultant before. Profile Manager is good for proof of concept things and testing, but it is not good in production at all. It's not a question of when it will eat itself or if it'll eat itself, but when. My own argument, my own thing is you're going to have to go to management and ask them for the ability to, procure an MDM. I mean, there's micro MDM out there, but that requires you to compile your own MDM. If you're not a developer, you're going to have a lot of work ahead of you. Honestly, a lot of the organizations that I know that are using Monkey and have needed an MDM have gone to simple MDM. It's a really great product, and it works very well with Monkey. And I would strongly, I try not to take sides too much on products. Use what fits your organization best. But if I was in your shoes, I would absolutely be giving the simple MDM folks a call and asking them to, what it's going to cost to get that rolled out to your organization. And I think it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. There's a lot of things you're probably doing that are going to be a lot further. I mean, it goes without saying that Apple would like to get to the point where you can manage your Macs 100%, utilizing MDM. They're not anywhere close to that right now. So they have a lot of work going. But their focus has been, of course, on preparing all the groundwork for this transition to Apple Silicon.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably a great discussion to have in the MDM channel on the macadmins.org Slack. There are quite a few options out there, and depending on your needs, you may find one that fits you better than another. So another question, if screen recording has already been approved in Catalina, does that approval carry over to Big Sur, or does it need to be reapproved with the upgrade?
It should, unless your TCC database gets reset. So if it's managed correctly today, it should be. Now, again, I've seen weird things where stuff has been approved and become not approved. And again, some of that I roll up to the fact that my machine is like a walking test machine. So, sometimes it's nice to do the occasional nuke and pave of your own device just to get back to a fresh state if you've done enough strange things to it and tested enough beta OSs on it. But in general, from what I have seen, permissions established in Catalina carry over to Big Sur. But again, something to test in your beta.
Very good. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think you might have gone over this before, but organizations that have not updated most of their hardware to Catalina, are they better off waiting for Big Sur, or should hardware be incrementally updated to Catalina first?
I don't think it's necessary to do that, to upgrade everybody to get there. I mean, if you're on Catalina, it probably makes sense. If you're on 10.15 anything, you should get to the latest OS. You should patch, within 30 days of it being released, as long as it doesn't break or cause significant problems in your environment. Having said that, certainly your IT staff should be running Catalina on that hardware. You should be qualifying things like, okay, our version of Office runs, our printer drivers work, our VPN doesn't. Because if you haven't at least tested Catalina for some of your core staff, making that jump from 10.14 to macOS 11, is going to be a much steeper climb. So absolutely make sure that you at least have, this is the version of Global Protect that works in Catalina on my Mac, and I'm going to deploy that to all of my Mojave and older systems, assuming it's compatible, so that when I go to update those machines, I won't have any problems. And again, you're definitely going to want to, when you're definitely going to want to have some of those users become testers of your upgrade workflow. You're not going to say, okay, Catalina or Big Sur's out, go nuts. No, you're going to want to walk before you run on that. Ideally, you're going to want to make some of those people your early adopters and jump on the later end of the beta cycle. So you can find experiences. And again, I'm going to reiterate that point. Take a look at any kernel extensions, launch daemons, launch agents, anything that's not stock Apple on your system, and ask yourself if it's something that you absolutely need to have on the system, and potentially remove it before doing that update. It's one of those things where the first time somebody comes into the Big Sur channel or AppleSeed private channel and says, well, I installed beta 3 and I can't log in and it's crashing and this and that, and it's like, okay, what security tools do you have? Well, I think I uninstalled everything. Well, take a look here. Oh, sorry, that had this other tool on it. Okay, yep, I took it off and now it works. So that's just really common.
Okay. Wow. So in a scenario where perhaps Apple Business Manager or School Manager is not available, what might be possible for kind of provisioning Macs since profiles can't be installed silently?
There's a couple of tools out there that can be used to provision machines. One of them is from Apple. If you have an SE, you can talk to them about their Mac provisioner. The other one is from Two Canoes, and that's the Mac Deploy Stick, which is free software. You can buy his automatons and you can buy support, and he actually has an MDM. That's actually another possibility. He's actually rolled MDM functionality into that product, I believe. So for the previous person who asked about, we have Monkey, we don't have an MDM, they could start talking to the Two Canoes folks as well. Those are good ways to provision systems. You're still going to be limited, what you could do from a profiles perspective until you get that device enrolled in an MDM of some kind.
Yeah.
So, or you're just going to have to do user education, or you're going to have to physically, you're not going to be able to automate some of those setup steps until, without somebody in front of the device, click approve. And don't forget, 8 minutes. You've got 8 minutes to approve that from when it pops up.
Okay. Very good. Let's see. So if someone's running boot camp on Catalina on an Intel system right now and they upgrade to Big Sur, would they expect that Windows to continue working, that Windows installation?
That's a really good question. I haven't tried that, mainly because I don't use boot camp. I don't know if Apple's officially said boot camp is dead on Big Sur. It's obviously not a thing on ARM, on Apple Silicon systems. So that is something that would probably be worth testing. Again, I haven't done a whole ton of stuff, ever since, since Apple moved to Intel and since VMware and Fusion came out, most of, I haven't had it because of the, I live in a Mac world and sometimes need to use Windows. And if RDP is an option for me, I'll use a VM. So I hate having to stop what I'm doing and reboot.
Right, absolutely.
So I personally haven't done that, but again, I would certainly test that before planning on updating. And again, if you're if you have workflows that depend on Boot Camp and devices that can run Boot Camp, this is where you need to stock up on that hardware. You know, if you have labs and things like that that need that, you need to make sure you've got the hardware to get you through the next period of time until you can look at, you know, what your next step is.
Yeah, absolutely. Screen recording is needed for remote support tools like BombGuard. Should we start thinking about giving clients admin rights if we need to support them, or would the remote support program need to do something different?
Well, this is something that Apple's, you know, this is a dichotomy that Apple has. This is where Apple's focus on user control and privacy and enterprise management kind of butt heads. I certainly understand why Apple doesn't want people to be able to proactively approve things, because there's way for nefarious or bad actors to do that. But at the same point in time, if my Mac is supervised and was provisioned, you know, it's an Apple Business Manager and provisioned through automated enrollment, I should have the ability to enable WebEx to be able to control the camera, to enable the camera or screen recording, or, you know, use those tools like BombGuard and sort of stuff. So that there's a real breakdown, and that's the perfect area where feedback and you know, the number of systems this affects, that's where it's really important to give that feedback to Apple. I had another thought on that, and that is, as far as users being admins, I'm not in favor of users running as admins 24/7. That doesn't mean I'm not in favor of letting users get admin rights when they need it, because let's face it, there's probably times that we all need it. For one reason or another, at least those of us who are power users, and especially admins, whether it's for troubleshooting or, you know, installation or whatnot, something that you can't do through an automated process. I'm a really big fan of SAP's privileges application. This allows you to toggle admin rights on and off to a system, and when you combine it with a profile, which Rich Troughton has available on his GitHub, where you can basically, the user can launch the privileges application and promote themselves to be an admin. The profile will automatically downgrade them from being an admin after some period of time. That to me is the perfect solution, because I can go in, it's like sudo. I can go in, do what I need to do, and then exit out. And again, that also saves me that when I'm, you know, when I don't need those admin credentials and I'm running as a standard user on my machine, if my machine somehow becomes compromised, you know, it's a lot. If I'm an admin, it's a bigger risk to the system than if I am not. So I would strongly look at privileges.
Okay, great. My company claims that we have to have security agents on Macs for PCI compliance. Do you have any experience on navigating PCI compliance or auditing findings regarding the presence or lack of actual endpoint agents on Macs?
So, yeah, I mean, this is definitely a topic for the security channel on MacAdmins Slack, and you'll find some people in there, and I'm going to give a shout out to Rick Heil, Refreshing Apathy, who's done a lot of work on PCI compliance on Macs. He's somebody, you know, that's a conversation that probably would be best handled there. You may need, you know, again, this is an area where you may need some tools beyond the built-in ones to satisfy management requirements. But PCI compliance, it's like an onion. There are many layers to it. So again, I think that's a topic that I don't feel I can speak to in great depth or context in this conversation.
Rusty, you're muted.
Thanks, Chris. There's a question about ARD having a worldwide scope, so it can replace BombGuard or LogMeIn. Do you see ARD as kind of a replacement or similar functionality, or that BombGuard, LogMeIn?
Actually, you know, in a previous role, not that long ago, I used ARD. ARD was a constant part of remote support for users, and it was pretty fragile. And then with some of the privacy changes that Apple implemented around screen control, you know, in Catalina, to me it made ARD. You know, I mean, when was the last time ARD was updated? You know, the running joke was like, "Oh, look, Apple hired an intern. ARD got an update this summer." You know, so. I don't see ARD as a viable product moving forward. I would look more towards a product like BombGuard or something like that. You know, I've used other tools like in various things like WebEx or Zoom or GoToMeeting, stuff like that for remote troubleshooting. And again, it is kind of a pain to make sure the users have to be able to approve these things. But I would not look or depend on using Apple Remote Desktop any further. It's not clear to me how long that product's going to be around.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so end users are required to allow screen recording, right? This is not something you can enable through the MDM.
That's correct. Now Apple, Apple has gotten that. There was pretty immediate vocal feedback. Nate Strauss and Eric Holtham were really pushing Apple on this on Slack. And there's actually a post on Apple's discussion forums where Apple says, "We understand the needs of business, and as later betas come out, I'm paraphrasing by the way, as later betas come out, we'll have a solution for you." I still recommend that people provide that feedback, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what they're going to do to allow organizations potentially better to manage that at all, whether that's via MDM or some other methodology.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. We do have a comment here. A clean install of Big Sur includes Boot Camp Assistant.
Okay, it's likely to work then. It may have issues with drive. Again, it's beta, so I wouldn't. I would certainly upgrade a machine as a test, but I certainly wouldn't plan on doing a lot with it because you have to worry about Boot Camp stuff on the Mac side. You have to worry about drivers on the Windows side and things like that. So that could be. It could be dicey. I wouldn't do it in production. For testing, absolutely.
Yeah, very good. Okay, well, if we ran out of time and didn't get your questions answered, please take them to the PSU Mac Slack channel on macadmins.org to have your questions answered there. Thank you, Robert Hammen, for taking your time today to deliver us the session, the last MacAdmins Campfire session. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.